Good evening. This is Rachel Blomquist, librarian at the Putnam County Public Library. Welcome to tonight's program, Celebrate the Holidays in Space. Before we begin, just a few reminders. On Tuesday, December 10th at 6 p.m. Central, the library will virtually host Father Dominic Garamone when he presents Bake Your Way Through the Holidays. In this program, learn how to make recipes for the season, including Hanukkah jelly donuts, fruited sweet potato bread for Kwanzaa, and a variety of show-stopping breads for Christmas. On Tuesday, December 17th at 5 p.m., experience the wonder of New York City Ballet's iconic holiday classic on the big screen when the library hosts at its Granville branch, George Balanchine's The Nutcracker. The film runs for approximately 100 minutes and is geared to adults and youth ages 8 and older. And on Tuesday, January 7th at 6 p.m. Central, the library will virtually host Claire Evans for her presentation on the life of Alf White, an unassuming country vet who practiced for 50 years in one of England's most beautiful places, the Yorkshire Dales. White rose to international fame later in life under the pen name James Herriot. All library programming is free and open to the public. It is also shareable, so please feel free to pass the information on to others. And now tonight, let's welcome NASA Solar System Ambassador Joel Napper. Joel?
Well, hi. Thank you, Rachel. It's nice to be here virtually. It'd be nice to see you all in person, but this is kind of a nice format as well. I live in the Kankakee area. I live in Bourbonnais, Illinois, and so little distant from you, not too far though. Very cold here. So I'm glad we're all in our homes uh, and warm. So I am going to start the share here. And we're going to start it. We are going to talk about how astronauts celebrate the holidays in space. Now, we'll start here. In the earlier days of spaceflight in the 60s, just a neat picture up on the space station here. In the earlier days of spaceflight, we really didn't have missions that occurred during the holidays. Some of the reasons for this is, just scheduling for the people on Earth. There are a lot of people besides the astronauts up in space that have to help them make sure everything's running correctly, and so nobody really wants to do that over the holidays if they can avoid it. Second thing, astronauts have families too, so they need to be able to spend the holidays with their families. The other thing that you don't really think about too much is there's issues with software and a year change. We don't want missions going from one year to the next year because often the software doesn't like that. And so, instead of having to test all that software with the year change, we try to avoid having astronauts up on a mission going from one year to another. So that's some of the reasons why we really, in the early days of the space program, really didn't have too many missions during the holidays. That changed in 1968 with the launch of Apollo 8. That was the first time we sent astronauts to the moon. And when you go to the moon, there's only certain times each month that you can launch towards the moon, where the moon's in the right spot, right lighting conditions, and that. So Apollo 8 was going to occur during Christmas. Now, Apollo 8 was originally set to test the lunar lander in Earth orbit. The lunar lander was the space vehicle, the only vehicle designed only to operate in space. It would take two astronauts down to the surface of the moon. And it was originally, Apollo 8 was going to test the lunar lander in Earth orbit to make sure things were working good with that spacecraft. But the lunar lander wasn't ready for Apollo 8. So they decided, why don't we take a bold step and send the astronauts to the moon? And this was a big step to send astronauts on the Saturn V rocket all the way out to the moon, a 3-day journey out there. go into lunar orbit, and then fire their engine to come back to Earth. Um, it was a bold plan at the time. There was thoughts that the Russians were going to, we were in a race with the Russians to get to the moon, and there was a thought that the Russians may send something to the moon to try to beat us, to say, oh, well, we've sent some astronauts to the moon before. So this wasn't meant to land on the moon, but this was the first time we would attempt to send people all the way to the moon. They would be further away from any other people on Earth, being out at that great distance. So we launched Apollo 8 on the Saturn V launch vehicle to the moon. This was the first time we had astronauts on this powerful rocket. And they went into orbit on Christmas Eve in 1968. And here's a picture. This is the famous Earthrise from Apollo 8, where you can see the Earth coming. It came up above the horizon of the moon. Now, they knew this was going to be a monumentous occasion to go out to the moon, and it was Christmas time, and they asked the crew to come up with something to say. And I will play you what they said when they went into orbit around the moon and beamed back this message to Earth.
Approaching lunar surface. Have a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament, the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
So that was the message from the Apollo 8 crew, the message given on Christmas Eve, 1968, when they'd just gone into orbit, and they broadcast the view out their window of the moon below. So this is Borman, Lovell, and Anders, the crew of Apollo 8. This was for a while, it was the last crew with all the crew members still alive. Jim Lovell went on to be in Apollo 13. If you've ever seen that movie, he was going to land on the moon, but they had a problem, and they barely made it back to Earth alive. This was the crew on the 50th anniversary on 2018. They were in Chicago for a get together. Unfortunately, astronaut Borman died in 2023, on November 7th, 2023 at 95. Jim Lovell and Frank Borman are still alive. Jim Lovell is 96 years old. This is Jim Lovell here. And Frank Borman is 90. So that was the first time we had astronauts on a mission at Christmas time, and any of the holidays actually. Apollo 17, the last flight of astronauts to the moon, almost hit Christmas time. They were on the moon from December 7th through the 19th in 1972. It's interesting. You could see the vehicle they drove around the moon. You actually see tire tracks from that car that they moved around the moon on. But Gene Cernan is the astronaut saluting the flag there. He's another astronaut who lived in Illinois. There's a Cernan Space Center near Chicago in honor of Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon. So we didn't get a chance to spend some time in space during holidays again until the Skylab program. Now, the Skylab program was the first space station the United States had. Basically, we took the third stage of that Saturn V rocket, and instead of filling it with fuel, they put laboratories and sleeping quarters and food, and they put a telescope on it to look at the sun. And this is a kind of a picture of Skylab from some of the astronauts. You can see some things that don't look right. Usually there would be another solar panel on the side here, and there's like a shade out here. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But Skylab was launched in 1973. Again, here's what the inside kind of looked. Instead of being filled with fuel, they had living quarters, they had exercise equipment, they had experiments. And here is kind of how they folded up the telescope on top here and put it in a shroud, and put it on the rocket, the Saturn V rocket, the very last Saturn V rocket. It was meant to send another crew to the moon, but they cut back and they cut the last few missions to the moon. But here's the launch on May 14th, 1973. But there was a problem. About less than a minute into the flight, a piece of the side here of the rocket kind of came off, and it damaged one solar ring. Actually, it pulled it off. You can see the wires dangling in this picture, and it pulled off a shield that was around the rocket, supposed to protect it from micrometeorites. And what it caused the space station to get very hot when the sun was shining on it, and it was underpowered. It was missing one solar panel here, and the other one you can see is kind of tied down. A piece of metal from that rocket kind of tied that solar panel down so it couldn't power the space station. But NASA and astronauts are pretty crafty, and they were able to figure out some things to do. So they sent the astronauts up. Here's what that solar panel looked like when it was pinned to the side there. But they sent them up with a pole like you would use to cut limbs off a tree, and they were able to cut the strap off and they were able to pull that solar panel out, so they had enough power. Even missing one, they had enough power with that one solar panel, and they put a shield on the space station to protect it from the heat. So they went on to spend many days on the space station. Here you see them taking a shower. You see them getting their teeth checked here by an astronaut who'd been trained in dentistry. And here you see one of the later Skylab crews having fun pretending to hold somebody up. Of course, they're all weightless there, but he looks like he's a muscle man. So Skylab first crew spent 28 days, the second crew spent 59 days, and the third crew spent 84 days in space. And at that time, that was the longest time any humans had spent in space. And not until the Russians and the Americans with bigger space stations would they spend the time. But it was that last crew, Skylab 3, that spent 84 days. They spent from November 16th to February 8th. So November 16th, 1973 to February 8th, 1974 in space. So they got to spend time at Thanksgiving and Christmas in space. And I'm showing you what looks like, well, what's interesting about this? Well, these are some of the food cans that went up on Skylab. They sent a lot of food with them. A lot of the foods were in cans like this. And then they would put these in trays, and the trays would warm up. They could control and heat up these trays. And some of the other food, they had to put water in to hydrate them. But they use these cans in a way to kind of build a Christmas tree. So we're going to see a little bit about that here. So here you see them sitting at a table with those cans eating dinner. But they built a Christmas tree out of these cans. The cans were on something called a backbone, where like a container that held all the different cans in it. And when they'd use all the cans, they'd be left with this backbone. And they built a Christmas tree out of the backbone. So we're going to see them and hear them talk about building this Christmas tree.
Tree was constructed out of food cans. Our food is packaged in small cans that are placed in large what are called over cans, long cans, and there is a structure inside the can which is called a herringbone, which really it acts as serves as a container for the cans so that they can all be pulled out at once. And it was these herringbones, so to speak, that we used to construct the limbs and leaves of the tree. Now, the small decorations that we have were sort of gathered from here and there in the spacecraft. Of course, we all shared in the construction of the Christmas tree. And of course, there was the one final inspiration, which rests on the top of the tree. And I'll let Dr. Ed Gibson explain that one. Well, first thing you notice about this tree, and I imagine you've noticed about your trees at home, it has no light. We're very energy up here also. Piece on the top, I think it's fairly straightforward. It's what you normally put on top of a tree, a star. But we've kept up with the times we're living right now and made it fit the scene, the very day and the very week for us. And perhaps it is very old at the same time. We'll be debating that one for a long time. But for us, it symbolizes Christmas. So from the crew of Skylab 3, we wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and an extra special message to all the guys that are going to be away from their families tomorrow, working with us on our EVA in order to get some good photography of the comet Kohoutek. To all of you guys down there that'll be working with us tomorrow and tonight, Christmas Eve, we thank you very much for your interest and your dedication. And to you, we wish a very special season's greetings. So long.
So that was the crew of Skylab 3. They're very proud of the Christmas tree that they built out of makeshift parts there. You know, Skylab was left after Skylab 3, it was boosted up in orbit, and the space shuttle was actually supposed to rendezvous with Skylab and send a little rocket out to connect it and put it in a higher orbit, and Skylab would have been the beginning of a huge space station for the US. But unfortunately, the sun was more active than they had thought and caused Skylab to fall into a lower and lower orbit more quickly, and the space shuttle just wasn't ready in time. So in 1979, July 11, 1979, Skylab fell back to Earth. Fortunately, it didn't injure anybody. It fell into the ocean and part of Australia. So that was really the first time we had astronauts up in space during the holidays since Apollo. The next space program we had was the space shuttle. It flew from 1981 to actually 2011. And we really only had a couple flights that were around the holidays of those 125 space shuttle flights. One of them was Hanukkah, STS-61, that flew in 1993 to service the Hubble telescope, was in space from December 2nd to December 13th. And that year, Hanukkah changes dates. Hanukkah is based on the position of the moon and the sun. And so it changes dates, and it happened to be, Hanukkah happened to be December 8th through 16th. So it coincided with the flight of the space shuttle here, and they were able to get the space shuttle home before the change of the year. But you see astronaut Jeffrey Hoffman with a little dreidel here. He's going to talk about celebrating Hanukkah up in space.
In Endeavor, Houston, for Jeff, all of America would like to know what you've got and what you're doing with it.
And one of the games that we play is a little game with a dreidel, and it's something that you see which side comes up, and according to that, you either win or lose. And I was just trying to see how you might reinterpret the rules for space flight. There's no celebration. I also brought along the other thing that we do. The last 8 days, and to celebrate it, we light a little menorah, which has 8 candles, and you light one more every day until finally on the 8th day, it's 8 candles. And so I brought a little traveling menorah. Of course, up here in the shuttle, we're not going to actually light the candles to help the celebration of the season. I brought it along. It's a little silver traveling menorah. And so with that and the dreidel, I'm all set for my onboard Hanukkah celebration.
So ST-61, they were able to celebrate Hanukkah. And the other space shuttle flight that actually flew at Christmas time was STS-103, the 103rd shuttle mission. It was the only shuttle mission to span through Christmas. They flew from December 20th to the 28th. So here they are. They got all their Santa Claus hats on for that flight. That was also a Hubble flight. Okay, well, the International Space Station was the time where we permanently had crews aboard, and so these crews got to spend all the holidays in space. And so in the year 2000, we started building the space station, and it was ready for occupancy. The first expedition, they called each flight an expedition. So the first expedition, Expedition 1, was for November 2nd of 2000 to March 19th of 2001. That was 136 days. So William Shepard, Yuri Gudzenko, and Sergei Krylov were the 3 astronauts, American astronaut and 2 cosmonauts that spent Christmas and Thanksgiving. here's the Thanksgiving turkey there up on the space station. That's when it was only able to support 3 permanently, but it was the very beginning of the permanent manning staffing of the space station, which we have had astronauts up there 24 years now, permanently occupied. Expedition 3, or Expedition, this is Expedition 16. This is Peggy Whitson. She was the commander, the first female commander of the space station. This was in 2007. Peggy Whitson actually has spent more time in space than any other woman or American. She spent a total of 675 days in space. She retired from NASA, and then she has flown up on SpaceX Axiom missions since then. And then in 2025, scheduled for April of this coming year, she's going to spend another 14 days. So she keeps adding to her time up in space here. But here she is with her crew celebrating Christmas in 2008. This is Expedition 18. They were in space from October 12th of 2008 to April 8th of 2009. One of the exciting things, probably not exciting to them, but one of the exciting things that happened is a piece of satellite debris got awfully close to the station. And so close they weren't able to move the station. The station has thrusters, so they can move it a little bit to avoid things. But this was so serious, they had the astronauts get in their Soyuz spacecraft and be ready to leave in case this piece hit the station and they had to evacuate. But fortunately, they didn't even see it. So it must have been far enough away that it didn't hit the station, but it was a little exciting up there during their mission. This is Expedition 22. They spent December 1st of 2009 through March 18th of 2010, and you see them celebrating with elf hats and Santa Claus hats and their little Christmas tree picture up on there. Thing about this mission, there was a period of 3 weeks where they only had 2 crew members on the station. It was just a timing issue. It hadn't been since some of the very first missions did they have so few astronauts on board the station. A lot of maintenance has to occur on the space station. So when you have just a few members on there, they're busy doing maintenance. They don't have as much time to do science. So that's why you want to have at least a crew of 5 up there. Right now we have a crew of 6. All right, this is Expedition 26, November of 2010. And one of the crew members for this in this picture is Scott Kelly right here. He later spent almost a year in space on Expedition 43 through 46 in 2015, but here he is. They're celebrating Christmas. Expedition 30 was November 21st of 2011 through April 27th of 2012. They celebrated Christmas here. An interesting thing that happened during their mission was on February 20th, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of John Glenn going up into space. He was the first American astronaut to go into orbit. And so this crew surprised him. He was with the NASA administrator at Ohio State University on this day, and they called down from space and wished him congratulations. You know, John Glenn actually got to fly on the space shuttle too, so that was cool that the astronaut who spent just a few hours in space then got to spend some time on the space shuttle on a mission. Expedition 34 was November 18th, 2012 through March 15th, 2013. They studied, interesting thing about them, they had an aquarium on board and they brought a fish and they studied how they had a fish. I can't remember the type, but it was a type you could almost see through, and they studied how the fish changed, their bone structure and things changed in space. And they pretty much swam like regular fish in this aquarium here on the space station. So I thought that was an interesting thing that happened up on the station. You could see the stockings that they have hung waiting for Santa Claus there. And then you could see some of the mission patches of the space station. You know, this was 2012, 2013. It had been permanently occupied for 12, 13 years at this point. Now, on Expedition 38, there was also an emergency spacewalk that had to happen on Christmas Eve of all days. The space station generates a lot of heat, and they have to cool parts on the space station. And one of the pumps that pumped coolant failed. Now, fortunately, they had spares that they had launched up to the space station, but these are huge refrigerator-sized pumps, and they had to go out on an emergency spacewalk on Christmas Eve and replace this spare cooling pump. So, even, when you want to celebrate Christmas or celebrate a holiday up in space, sometimes you have to do something to make sure your living space is going to work. So they had an emergency spacewalk on Christmas Eve. All right, this is Expedition 42. They were up in space at Christmas in 2014. And you can see they have a couple space suits. Space station always has some space suits available so they can do EVAs, like the emergency spacewalk they had to do on Christmas Eve on the flight before. But the interesting thing about this flight, you can see they've got milk and cookies there for Santa Claus, and they've dressed these spacesuits up with the hats. But this was the mission. If you saw the movie Gravity, where they have to take us, they have a problem with the space shuttle, and you got one person making it back alive. Well, this is the flight that they patterned. This is the Expedition 42. When I think it was Sandra Bullock gets to the space station, you don't see Expedition 42, but those were the astronauts who were aboard this fictitious Gravity, who had left when she got aboard the space station. So I thought that was kind of interesting that Gravity actually used Expedition 42 as the mission that was happening during that time. This is Expedition 50 on October 30th of 2016 through April 10th of 2017. Peggy Whitson she wasn't commander, but she was on board. This was her last mission before she retired from NASA. She's the astronaut we saw earlier who spent more time in space than any woman astronaut, actually any American astronaut. But there was a French astronaut. This is the French astronaut, Thomas Pesquet, and he and Peggy and one of the other astronauts did a little video on their holiday here, and I want to share that with you.
Hello from the Expedition 50 crew. We'd like to share with you today a little bit about what Christmas means to us in this time of year. For me, it's a lot about family. We always travel typically to meet up with our family because we're dispersed all over the country. We go home to Georgia quite a bit, or Florida, or sometimes Colorado to meet up with all of our immediate and distant family members. Always a great time just to get together and share with each other. This season is typically thought of as all about getting things around Christmas, but we in our family try to think of it as the giving aspect, giving of our many talents and of our resources and of our time to others less fortunate. It's also a season that I loved. I just love kind of the Christmas season and all the lights and the music and everything that kind of leads up to it. And my family, I think, shares the same thing. I will now pass off to Peggy Whitson.
Hi, well, I think being on board the ISS gives us a slightly different perspective of Christmas. Obviously, friends and family are important to all of us. But besides funny hats, there is another very important aspect of being on ISS, and that's seeing the planet as a whole. And it actually reinforces, I think, that the fact that we should live as one people and strive for peace.
And I can only second what's been said before. I remember growing up, I was born in a very big family. I had 25 cousins, and for most of them, the only time we could catch up was around Christmas time. So I was very much looking forward to that. This year, I won't be able to be there, of course, but I'll think of them. I'll try to give them a call, catch up as much as I can, and make the most of this opportunity to look at the earth, reflect about what Christmas means to us as individuals, to the world in general, and I think we'll have a good time on board the ISS and share a Christmas meal together.
Thanks, Taman. Speaking of a meal, we'd like to share with you some of the items we're going to have up here for Christmas dinner. Taman has some special European food. I'll let him show you that and talk about it.
So I'm lucky enough to have recipes that have been prepared for me by French chefs, and they're all based on ingredients that I used to love when I was a kid, that my grandmother used to cook for the big family dinners that we had around Christmas time. So as a main, I'll have a chicken supreme with morels, which is a delicacy that we'll share together, and I have enough, not just one can, but enough for everybody in the crew. As dessert, we'll have gingerbread, which is also a special one that I remember from way back when, and that's going to make me travel down memory lane, and I hope you guys will like it. And as a starter, because we don't do things in order on the ISS, we'll have ox tongue, which is also typical of the region I was born in, the region I'm from, and I hope everybody's going to like it on board the ISS.
And to go along, we'll have some beverages. I've got some packaged cider and cocoa. Hot cocoa is one of my favorites, especially growing up in Iowa when you wanted to stay warm.
And for some of the traditional U.S. meals, we're going to have turkey. It comes in a pouch up here, but we'll have turkey for us to eat along with fruit salad. And what else do we have? I know we've got some green beans and potatoes and some mashed potatoes, which are coming out there dehydrated, and some cornbread stuffing. And we have plenty of desserts to go along with these things as well. We have cranapple dessert, which is like a cobbler, as well as some chocolate cake. So we're going to eat very well up here at Christmas. And of course, we're all going to miss our family members and wish we could be with them, but we're going to have a great time up here. And like Tomas said earlier, we're going to reflect on what this whole season means to us and our families. So from the Expedition 50 crew, we want to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
The food improved quite a bit from the cans on Skylab there. One other thing about Peggy Whitson, she applied to be an astronaut, I think 9 times, and didn't get in, or 8 times. And on the 9th time she got in, and she ended up spending more time in space than any other American. So I think that's a cool story. Came from a real small town in Iowa, very small town. Okay, just a few more slides here, just 5 more here. This is Expedition 61 on October 3rd, 2019 through February 6, 2020. And Christina Koch is the commander here, and she has a really good message about Christmas I wanted to play. Then I'm going to share something special about Christina in a second here.
Happy holidays. You know, my favorite thing about the holiday season is that it's a time when the world slows down and we all get a chance to think about and appreciate and reflect on what's really important, which is the people that we love and spending time together. However you're celebrating this holiday this year, may it be one full of joy.
You know, when I think about missing my family on the ground, I know that they're visiting family and spending time with family, and we're going to get to do much the same thing. And I'm going to bring some of my own family traditions with us on board the International Space Station. On Christmas Eve, we turn out all the lights in the house and we just have candlelight. Now, we can't have candles and candlelight on the International Space Station, but we can turn the lights down low and we can watch Christmas movies. And so we're going to do something like that, and we'll enjoy our Christmas Eve together and welcome in Christmas Day the next morning.
This time of the year means for most people spending time with their family and friends. We have special friends aboard our crew, and we're very happy to be together. But of course, we don't get to spend it with our families. At the same time, our thoughts go to all those who are deployed to dangerous and critical areas and are doing service. And they also cannot spend their time with their family and friends. We are thinking about you during our time up here in orbit.
As a child growing up, I was fortunate enough to celebrate 2 different holidays all through the holiday season, both Christmas and Hanukkah. So whatever it is that you're celebrating this holiday season, we hope that you find peace and love and enjoy spending time with all those around you that are important. We'll be celebrating up here as well with a few additional special items.
The stockings were floated by the chimney with care. Now, what are we gonna stuff in these stockings? I think we might need some goodies, some treats.
Well, Thanksgiving, we just had turkey, so for this holiday, we have special smoked salmon.
We had to come all the way to space to try to get away from fruitcake, but it didn't work. We got some anyway.
We have hot apple cider and hot cocoa.
Happy holidays.
It's only cider and cocoa on the station. The Russians, sometimes they bring more adult beverages. But,
for more space.
but NASA is pretty much not tolerant of that. The thing I wanted to share about Christina Koch, here she is. She is going to fly on Artemis 2, hopefully next year. And they are going to fly around the moon for the first time since Apollo 17 came back in 1973. So she's one of the astronauts chosen to be part of Artemis 2 and will fly around the moon on the next flight of Artemis. Again, right now, hopefully it's going to fly next year. There's some heat shield issues they're working out on that spacecraft before they fly it. The last crew I want to introduce you to is the current crew up on the space station. This is Expedition 72. They've been up there since September 23rd of this year, and they are going to come back in March. And there are 2 extra people in this crew, Suni Williams and Barry Wilmore. Now, they came up on the Starliner spacecraft in June of this year, and they were only supposed to stay for about 5 to 7 days. But as you probably know, there was some issues with the Boeing Starliner, and they decided that it was safer to send it home by itself rather than to risk these astronauts. So they are up on the space station. They're doing well. There's plenty of food for them, and they're going to come back on a SpaceX capsule in March of this coming year. And they had a Thanksgiving message for us that I will share with you. This is the last slide here.
Greetings from the International Space Station. Our crew up here just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to all our friends and family who are down on Earth and everyone who is supporting us.
Thanksgiving is typically a holiday where family and friends get together. Sometimes that can't happen to physically be around each other, but today's age, you can virtually tie in to your family and friends.
And one of those big traditions is having a Thanksgiving meal together. And so we're going to celebrate that tradition up here, though our meal may look a little bit different. Don, if you hold the mic. So we've got a container here of all the things that we're going to enjoy on Thanksgiving. It is a feast. Let me see. We've got Brussels sardines, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash, apples and spice,
Smoked turkey.
and smoked turkey. It's going to be delicious.
It's true, we have much to be thankful for. On a professional sense, I mean, there's not many places that you can be that you can actually lay on the ceiling, and this is one of them. We're thankful for zero gravity. It's fantastic. And of course, in a personal sense, our family, our friends, those that are lifting up prayers for us and have been, we're grateful for that. We're grateful for a nation that is a spacefaring nation that lets us live free, say what we think is important to say, and so many other things. So much to be thankful for in this season, to be reminded of that, to have a holiday that celebrates that. that's something to be thankful for as well. And so from all of us on the International Space Station,
Happy Thanksgiving.
So that was the crew of the current space station. So they're up there right now, and I'm sure if you've gone out at night, you've been able to see them see that bright object in space. So they're up on the space station right now. So there's Santa on Mars. Someday we'll have a base and humans living on Mars, and we'll have to maybe get Santa Claus to come visit on us on Mars there. So that was my presentation on celebrating the holidays in space. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions for me.
I think we have one in the chat right now from Brianna. She asks, do astronauts have to request holiday accommodations, or are those factored in when they schedule and staff missions?
Well, they they train usually for about a year and a half for a space station mission, and they're usually pretty good about what the dates are gonna be. But things can always happen that kind of messes up that schedule. For example, the two astronauts who were only supposed to be there for a week who ended up on this mission. So the mission right now, there were a couple astronauts who were training to be on this current expedition that didn't get to go because they had to give up their seats so that they could bring the two other astronauts back. So a Starlink SpaceX capsule launched with only two astronauts so that it can bring 4 astronauts back. So those astronauts had planned to be on this mission, and they're not. So they'll get on a different mission. So the other thing is you can have landing site issues where you plan to come home, but the weather's not good. The last group that came back to Earth, they were going to land in the Gulf of Mexico, and they had to postpone that landing for a few weeks until they had some good weather. So you can have issues, but most of the time the astronauts know when their mission is scheduled, and not all of them there at Christmas time, but some of them are there at the holidays. So again, they pretty much know when they're gonna go, but there are things that can happen in space flight that changes the schedule sometimes.
Okay. And we did get a pre-submitted question asking, do astronauts use electric or battery-powered candles for menorahs or kinaras?
They use battery powered. Everything's battery powered. You don't want to have an open flame on a space station. The closest they get to a flame, there is something called an oxygen candle, and it's an interesting thing. It's a Russian-made candle. It's really a tin box, and you light it, and instead of giving off smoke and carbon dioxide, it gives off oxygen. And sometimes when they have a lot of extra crew members on board, they will light one of these oxygen candles. But interesting story on the space station Mir, which was the Russians' space station prior to the ISS. They had a problem lighting one, and something happened, and a flame erupted, and it was blocking their way, and the space station was filling up with smoke. And an American astronaut happened to be on board at that time, and he was told to evacuate to the Soyuz, the spacecraft, to come home in case they needed to. But fortunately, they were able to get some gas masks on their face and fight the flame with a fire extinguisher, and the candle burnt out. So it's very dangerous to have an open flame. They do have some experiments that they do that have some flame, but it's contained within a box, and they're able to suppress that fire if there were to be an emergency. But yes, they only battery powered flames, fortunately, on the space station.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, so I will thank everyone for attending tonight's event. Please complete the survey that will appear when the Zoom ends. We really appreciate your feedback. And now I'll turn it back over to Joel for closing comments.
Well, I really appreciate you all joining tonight. I hope the weather gets warmer. I hope we don't get much snow Wednesday, right? But I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy 2025. And maybe we'll get to all meet in person someday. So thank you for your attention tonight.
And thank you for joining us. Also, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone who is on tonight, and good night.